Welcome back, mathematicians. In this video, we are going to learn how to solve a quadratic equation by factoring. So the first thing we should do is identify the standard form of a quadratic equation, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b, and c are real numbers. Now let's look at how to solve. So we first need to collect all terms on one side and simplify if necessary. So you might have to apply the distributive property or combine some like terms, but you want to gather all terms to one side because your goal is to get 0 on one side of the equal sign. The next step is to factor the quadratic expression. So, everyone's kind of got their own strategy for how to factor. Some people use a guess and check model. Others use factor by grouping. Whatever your strategy is, make sure that you are comfortable with it and you want to factor that ax squared plus bx plus c quadratic expression. And then finally, you want to use the zero product property. Now, the zero product property tells us if we have a times b and that product is 0, then we know a is equal to 0 or b is equal to 0. Now let's look at these two examples and apply those steps. Our first example is x squared plus 3x is equal to 0. We see that the right side is already 0 and all terms are gathered on the left. We also see that there is no simplifying needed. We do not need to apply the distributive property. We don't need to combine like terms. So we want to factor this left side. And what we notice is that on the left side, we have what's called a common factor with both of these terms. So the common factor, or the greatest common factor, GCF of x squared and 3x, is x. And so the other factor is going to be x plus 3, and it's still equal to 0. Now we use the zero product property. We set both factors equal to 0, and we solve. Now the one factor is already solved for us. The second factor, we're going to subtract 3 to both sides in this simple one-step equation, and so we get x is equal to -3. So we have two solutions, and we'll rewrite this as x equals 0 and -3. And we know that both are solutions because we can substitute them back into the original equation for x one at a time and verify that if I substitute 0 into x, I get 0 equals 0, and if I substitute -3 into the x variable, I also get 0 is equal to 0. Let's go to the next one. So I've got x squared plus 2x is equal to 3x plus 12. So you notice I do not have a 0 on one side or the other. So we need to move these terms over so that way we get one side equal to 0. What I choose to do is move the terms from the right over to the left. So I'm going to subtract 3x to both sides. And so I get x squared minus x is equal to 12. And then I subtract 12 to both sides. And so I get x squared minus x minus 12 is equal to 0. So now I have my quadratic expression on the left. Now the reason I liked moving everything to the left is because I like it when my leading coefficient, when the a is positive. I'm just a fan of that. I like it. I think it's easier to factor when we have a as a positive value. So now let's factor that quadratic expression. So again, I highly encourage you to go back and review your strategies for factoring, but what you get is x minus 4 times x plus 3. And so now we have our two factors, and we want to use the zero product property, which tells us we set x minus 4 equal to 0, and x plus 3 is equal to 0, and solve both of these. I'll add 4 to both sides, and so x is equal to positive 4, and I subtract 3 to both sides on this equation, so x is equal to -3. So rewriting it one more time so that it's nice in a nice list, I have x is equal to -3, 4. All right, guys, good luck.